I guess it was in the late 60s, early 70s, and I had just started making a name in country music, so of course. Well, I wanted to be a star, but I always thought of a star more of as a singing star, and being on the Grand Ole Opry, being on stage and performing. But I figured that if my career went the way I wanted it to, that I would eventually wind up doing the movies and Vegas. And it was a real fun thing. It's not as exciting to me as my music, but it's certainly something different, and I like a challenge.
In the last 24 hours, the entire world was left in shock. Dolly Parton, the country legend who wrote Jolene and I Will Always Love You, the woman who spent her life making sure no one ever felt ordinary, died on Tuesday, August 25, 2026, at the age of 80. She passed away at Vanderbilt-Ingram Cancer Center in Nashville after a brief and private battle with cancer. Almost no one knew how serious it had become. Almost no one knew what was happening in those final hours. And almost no one was ready for the quiet, heartbreaking truth she left behind. This is the story of Dolly's last 24 hours, and the legacy that is already breaking hearts around the world. Chapter 1. The Last 24 Hours. They didn't tell the world she was dying. Not at first, not even close. On Tuesday, August 25, 2026, the news hit like a slap. Dolly Rebecca Parton Dean, 80 years old, the woman who spent 6 decades making ordinary people feel seen, had died in Nashville. Her family didn't send a press release first. They sent a nephew. Brian Seaver looked into a camera and spoke the words Dolly had asked him to say years earlier, back when death still felt like a distant idea. He had been her head of security for more than 20 years. His father held the job before him. Dolly picked him for this moment on purpose. "This video announcement is something Dolly asked of me years ago," he said, "before I fully absorbed it as a future reality." Then came the line that stopped people mid-scroll. After bravely facing a brief battle with cancer, Dolly departed her earthly life today at the Vanderbilt-Ingram Cancer Center surrounded by loved ones. That was the first time most of the world heard the word cancer. The type was never released, not then, not in the hours that followed. Her team kept that part private. What they did confirm was this: she had been admitted on Friday, August 21st. 4 days later, she was gone. 4 days. That is the part that still sits heavy. Because on that same Friday, the day she went into the hospital, Dolly was still talking like a woman with unfinished business. She told People magazine she was dealing with health issues she just didn't pay attention to while she was watching over Carl, her husband of nearly 59 years, who had died in March 2025. "Even though I'm still healing, I'm still working," she said. "I've dreamed myself into a corner, and I still have so many things I want to achieve, so I'm going to keep on working as long as I can to see everything come to life." Those were among her last public words. Picture it. Same day she is admitted to a cancer center, she is still talking about a Broadway musical, a Nashville museum, a hotel, Avatar performances, more work, more dreams. That was Dolly. She did not announce a farewell tour. She did not sit the world down and explain. She kept the rhinestones on and the truth close. Go back 11 days earlier and the picture gets sharper. August 14th, Dollywood. The grand opening of Night Flight Expedition. A massive new ride, the kind of event Dolly would normally walk into like she owned the mountain. She didn't walk in. She appeared on a screen. She was in Nashville. She wore glitter. Behind her, giant butterfly wings flapped in the video. She smiled the same smile fans had known since the 1960s and told the crowd her doctor had clipped my wings. "I've told you before, all my fans, that I've had a few little health issues," she said. "And sometimes I get a little dizzy and I get dehydrated. And I'm dehydrated. So my Nashville doctor has kind of clipped my wings saying, 'You ain't traveling this week.'" Then she promised what she always promised. "You have fun, and I'm going to see you down the road." She never made it down that road. Before that video, there was one last time the public actually saw her in person. June 24th, 2026. A ribbon cutting at Dolly's Tennessee and travel stop in Cornersville, Tennessee. People who were there later said she seemed happy, funny, like herself. Not in visible pain. That is the last time cameras caught her standing among fans, cutting a ribbon, doing the small-town things she never outgrew. Between that June afternoon and the August hospital bed, the public only got fragments. Dizziness, dehydration, kidney trouble, autoimmune issues, a canceled Las Vegas residency, a year of "I'm still healing." Enough to worry people, not enough to prepare them. That is how the illness stayed hidden. Not because Dolly vanished, because Dolly kept showing up in the only way she knew how, with a joke, a sparkle, a promise that the work wasn't finished. She had been the queen of the tabloids, then joked she was the queen of social media AI. She knew how fast a rumor could run, so she fed the world just enough truth to keep the panic down and kept the rest inside the family. By the time Brian Seaver posted the video on August 25th, the world learned the rest in one sentence: a brief battle with cancer. Surrounded by loved ones. Vanderbilt-Ingram Cancer Center, Nashville. No hour-by-hour hospital diary was released. No list of final visitors, no leaked medical chart. The family asked for a small private service. They asked people not to send flowers. They asked them to give to the Imagination Library instead. And Dolly, according to her nephew, had already chosen how she wanted to rest. After a life wearing heavy rhinestones, Brian said, she told him, she finally deserves to be comfortable and have some rest. She wanted a bed of plush cotton. That detail lands harder than the headlines. The woman who built an empire out of sequins, wigs, and work decided at the end that she was tired of the wait. The show could go on without her standing in the lights. So when people say they hid the illness until the last minute, that is not a conspiracy. It is a character study. Dolly Parton spent her whole life controlling the story. She wrote the songs, she built the park, she designed the image. And in the final days, she did the same thing with her death. She let the world see the smile, the wings, the interview, the work. She did not let them see the hospital room until it was already over. That is why August 25th felt like a theft, because 4 days earlier she was still saying she had so many things left to do. 11 days earlier she was still promising to see everyone down the road. 2 months earlier she was still standing in public, laughing, cutting a ribbon. Then the ribbon was gone. The road ended. And the woman who never wanted to be ordinary left the world the way she lived in it. On her own terms, with the hardest part kept private until there was nothing left to hide. Chapter 2. From a one-room cabin to a global legend. She was born into poverty. She died a global icon. Before the wigs, before the rhinestones, before the world knew her name, there was a cabin. January 19, 1946. Locust Ridge, Sevier County, Tennessee. Deep in the folds of the Great Smoky Mountains, where winter air cuts your lungs and the hills keep their secrets. Dolly Rebecca Parton was born the fourth of 12 children into a house that was barely a house at all. One room, no electricity, no running water, a wood stove doing the work of heat, light, and dinner. If you want to understand Dolly, you have to start with the sound of that room. Not applause, not a guitar solo, the sound of a battery radio. At night, when the work was done and the babies were quiet enough, the Parton family gathered around that little box like it was a fireplace. The Grand Ole Opry came through the static. Fiddles, banjos, voices from a world that felt 100 miles and 100 years away. Nashville was a rumor. The Opry was church. And a little girl with pale hair and a too big imagination sat there listening like the songs were speaking directly to her. Her father, Robert Lee Parton, farmed tobacco and whatever else the mountain would give him. He was smart. Dolly would say that for the rest of her life. But he could not read. That fact lived in the house as quietly as the cold. Her mother, Avie Lee, made do with scraps, prayer, and a kind of mountain stubbornness that does not announce itself. 12 children, one cabin, enough love to go around, never enough money. That is the air Dolly grew up in. Wood smoke, damp clothes, dirt floors, the smell of biscuits if they were lucky, the sound of siblings breathing in the dark, and always somewhere under it, music. She started writing songs before she could spell the word future. 5 years old, 6 years old, a corncob doll with corn silk hair. She named a song after it, Little Tiny Tasseltop. Her mother kept the words in a shoebox like they were jewelry. That is how early it started, not in a studio, not with a publisher. In a child's mouth, in a house that could not afford paper sometimes, with a melody that had nowhere to go except out. People like to romanticize poverty when the person who survived it becomes famous. Don't. This was not charming. This was hunger wearing a smile. This was a little girl wearing a coat her mother sewed from leftover scraps and getting laughed at for it, and then turning that humiliation into one of the most beloved songs in American music. Coat of Many Colors was not a branding exercise. It was a receipt, proof of what the cabin cost. She learned early that the world would look at a poor mountain girl and decide what she was worth. So she decided first. By 10, she was singing on Knoxville television. By 13, she had already tasted a recording studio and the Grand Ole Opry stage. The voice was high, bright, almost childlike, and already impossible to ignore. The talent was not the miracle. The will was. A child from Locust Ridge did not accidentally end up in Nashville. She aimed at it the way other kids aim at the next ridge over. The day after she graduated high school, she left. 18 years old, 1964, one suitcase and a destination, Nashville. That is the sentence people love because it sounds like a movie. In real life, it was a gamble dressed as a bus ride. She had written her way out of the holler in her head long before the wheels started moving. The city did not roll out a red carpet. It rarely does. What it did was give her a place to work, and Dolly Parton had been working since she was old enough to hear a radio. 2 years later, on May 30th, 1966, she married Carl Thomas Dean. That part of the story is almost shocking in how quiet it stayed. The most famous woman in country music married a man the public barely saw. No circus, no magazine spread that explained him. Carl ran an asphalt business. He hated the spotlight. Dolly loved him for 58 years. When she talked about him later, she did not talk like a celebrity describing a husband. She talked like a girl from the mountains who found the one person who did not need the wig to recognize her. Ours is a great old love story, she would say. Most people don't stay that close that long. They stayed that close until March 3, 2025, when Carl died at 82. By then, Dolly had already become the thing the cabin could not imagine: a global symbol, songs in every language, a theme park on the land that raised her, hundreds of millions of books sent to children who might otherwise grow up the way she did, hungry for stories and for proof that they mattered. But that is the later Dolly. Chapter 2 belongs to the earlier one. The girl listening to the Opry through static. The child writing songs about a doll. The teenager who understood that if she stayed in that one-room world, the world would never hear her. The 18-year-old who left home and did not leave the mountain behind. She packed it. She turned it into lyrics. She wore it in public until the public could not look away. That is why the hook is not poetry, it is arithmetic. Born January 19, 1946, in a cabin with no electricity. Died August 25, 2026, as one of the most recognizable women on earth. The distance between those two dates is not luck. It is a child who heard music in the dark and decided the dark would not get the last word. It is a father who could not read and a daughter who built a library for millions of children because of him. It is poverty that tried to define her, and a voice that refused the definition. When people watched her in sequins decades later, they thought they were looking at glamour. They were looking at a survival strategy that learned how to sparkle. The wig was armor. The smile was discipline. The songs were the cabin, rewritten so the rest of the world could finally sit in that room and hear what she heard. A battery radio. A one-room house. A little girl who was never going to stay ordinary. That is where the legend starts, not on a stage. In the dark, with the Opry leaking through the static and a child already writing her way out. Chapter 3. The Songs That Never Die. The song she wrote to say goodbye to her old boss later became one of the biggest hits in the world. Some songs are written for the radio. Dolly Parton wrote hers for the wounds that never quite healed. It began with a coat. In the years of her childhood, her mother stitched together scraps of leftover fabric because that was all the family had. The other children laughed. Dolly wore it with quiet pride, and years later she turned that memory into Coat of Many Colors, a song so honest it still stops people mid-breath. Then in 1973 came Jolene. A red-haired woman walked into the room, and in 3 minutes of almost gentle melody, Dolly laid bare every fear of being left behind. The song became timeless because the feeling was. But the song that would travel farthest was the one she wrote in 1974 to say goodbye. Ready to leave, Porter Wagner, the man who had given her a national stage and then tried to keep her on it, Dolly sat down and wrote, "I Will Always Love You." Soft, final, completely hers. Nearly 20 years later, in 1992, Whitney Houston lifted that same song into the stratosphere and turned it into one of the biggest hits the world has ever known. Dolly never claimed the glory. She simply smiled, knowing the truth had outgrown the moment that created it. By 1980, she was writing history again. While filming 9 to 5, she tapped out the title song on her acrylic nails. It raced to #1 on both country and pop charts and earned her an Oscar nomination. The mountain girl who once listened to the Opry on a battery radio was now scoring a mainstream anthem for every woman who refused to stay invisible. Over 100 million records, 10 Grammys, the Country Music Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2022. The numbers are staggering, but they are only the echo. The real story lives in the songs themselves, proof that a girl from a one-room cabin could take her pain, her pride, and her goodbyes, and turned them into something the whole world still needs to hear. Chapter 4. A Heart Bigger Than the Stage. Chapter Hook. She gave away more than 332 million books to children. Fame can make a person smaller. Dolly Parton used it to become larger. In 1995, long after the Rhinestones and the #1 hits, she quietly started something that would outlive every chart position. She called it the Imagination Library. The idea was almost painfully simple. Every month, mail one free book to any child between birth and age 5. No forms that made parents feel judged, no income requirements, just a book arriving in the mailbox like a small, steady promise. The reason lived closer to home than most people knew. Her father, Robert Lee Parton, was one of the smartest men she ever met. He could fix almost anything, read the weather in the sky, and raise 12 children on hard ground, but he could not read a printed page. That quiet fact stayed with Dolly like a splinter. She once said the Imagination Library was the thing that would have made her daddy proudest. So she built it, first for the children of her own East Tennessee County, then for the country, then for the world. By the time of her death, more than 332 million books had been placed in small hands. 1 in every 6 children under 5 in the United States was receiving them. The program had crossed oceans. And still, every time a child opened a new package, it carried the same invisible message: you are worth the story. That was only one part of the giving. When the world shut down in 2020, Dolly did not wait for applause. She donated $1 million to research that helped create the Moderna COVID vaccine. She never turned it into a press tour. She simply wrote the check and kept moving. Later, she joked that she was a very rich woman who is very poor, because so much of what she earned went straight back out the door. Then there was Dollywood. People see the roller coasters and the sparkle and think theme park. Locals see paychecks. In a region that once watched its children leave for work elsewhere, Dolly built an economic engine that kept families on the mountain. The park employs thousands. It lifts restaurants, hotels, and small businesses for miles around. She did not just put her name on the gate, she put jobs behind it. When she died, the family asked the world for one specific kindness: do not send flowers, send books. Donate to the Imagination Library instead. It was the most Dolly request possible: practical, generous, and aimed at children she would never meet. That is the measure of the woman. She could have stopped at the music. She could have stopped at the fortune. Instead, she kept looking for the next child who might grow up the way she did, hungry for stories and for proof that someone somewhere believed they mattered. The stage made her famous. The giving made her unforgettable. 332 million books. $1 million that helped save lives. An entire region that still works because she refused to leave it behind. These are not side notes to a career. They are the careers. Chapter 5. The Final Days. Chapter Hook. 4 days before she died, Dolly still said, "I still have so many things I want to achieve." She never announced the end. On Friday, August 21, 2026, the same day she was admitted to Vanderbilt-Ingram Cancer Center, Dolly Parton sat for what would become her final interview. She spoke to People magazine the way she always spoke: direct, a little wry, and still looking forward. "I am dealing with some health issues that I just didn't pay attention to when I was watching over Carl," she said. Her husband of nearly 59 years had died in March 2025. While she cared for him, she had set her own body aside. Now the bill was coming due. But even then she refused the language of goodbye. "Even though I'm still healing, I'm still working," she told them. "I've dreamed myself into a corner and I still have so many things I want to achieve, so I'm going to keep on working as long as I can to see everything come to life." Those words, "I still have so many things I want to achieve," landed harder once the world learned what was already happening behind the scenes. The Broadway musical about her life, the museum in Nashville, the hotel, projects she had spoken about for years. She named them the way a person names unfinished rooms in a house they still plan to live in. 4 days later, on Tuesday, August 25th, she was gone. The official statement was brief and careful. She died at the cancer center in Nashville, surrounded by loved ones, after a brief battle with cancer. The type was never disclosed. No detailed timeline of her final hours was released. No hospital diary, no leaked account of the last conversation. The family kept that door closed, the same way Dolly had kept so many private doors closed her entire life. What the public does know is the shape of the days leading up to it. 11 days before the end, she had already been too weak to travel. On August 14th, she appeared only by video at the opening of Dollywood's newest ride, wearing digital butterfly wings and joking that her doctor had clipped my wings. She promised the crowd she would see them down the road. She never did. 2 months earlier, in June, she had still been well enough to stand in public at the opening of her Tennessean travel stop, smiling, cutting a ribbon, looking like the Dolly people expected. Between that June afternoon and the August hospital room, the decline stayed mostly private. Dizziness, dehydration, kidney trouble, autoimmune issues. Enough for the rumor mill to spin, never enough for a clear diagnosis until the very end. When the news finally broke, it arrived through her nephew, Brian Seaver, the man she had chosen years earlier to deliver this exact message. He said she had lived in the light. He said she was in the arms of Jesus, reunited with Carl. He said she had asked to rest in a bed of soft cotton, free at last from the weight of the rhinestones. That is the last image the family chose to leave us with. Not a hospital monitor, not a final struggle described in detail, but a woman who had carried the sparkle for so long that she finally asked for something gentle. 4 days before the end, she was still listing the work she meant to finish. 4 days later, the work belonged to everyone else. The gap between those two moments is where the real story sits, quiet, private, and unfinished on purpose. Dolly Parton controlled her narrative until the final page. Even in death, she decided how much of the last chapter the world was allowed to read. Chapter 6. The Legacy That Remains. The lights did not go out. The morning after the world learned Dolly was gone, Dollywood opened its gates anyway. The park's statement was simple and pure. Dolly, as Dolly wanted, the show must go on. Guests still rode the coasters. Children still laughed under the same Tennessee sky she had loved. The mountain that raised her refused to stop moving just because its most famous daughter had left it. In Nashville, the Grand Ole Opry did what the Opry does best. On Saturday night, they cleared the schedule and turned the entire evening into a living memorial. Artists stepped to the same wooden circle where Dolly once stood as a teenager and sang her songs back to her. Coat of Many Colors, Jolene, I Will Always Love You. The room that once launched her now held her in return. Across the country, American flags dropped to half-staff by presidential order. For 1 full week, the nation's most official symbol bowed its head. It was a rare, quiet acknowledgement that this particular loss crossed every political line, every generation, every zip code. And outside the gates of her Brentwood home, ordinary people did what ordinary people always do when words fail. They left flowers, handwritten notes, small rhinestone pins, children's drawings, photographs of themselves holding imagination library books. The pile grew hour by hour until the driveway looked like a garden that had bloomed overnight out of pure grief and gratitude. That is the shape of the legacy, not a statue, not a final album, a theme park that still employs thousands, a stage that still sings her name, flags that still fly lower for her, and strangers who still feel the need to stand at her gate and say thank you out loud. Dolly Parton did not just sing about love and poverty. She lived exactly what she sang, kind, generous, and never fake. If you ever hummed Jolene in the car, if a child in your life ever received a free book with her name on the label, take 1 quiet minute today and remember her. What do you think was Dolly's greatest gift? The music or the heart behind? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. If this story moved you, hit like and share it so more people can carry her light a little farther. I'll see you in the next one.